Order. Questions for oral answer. Mr. Saktiandi Supaat.
Mr. Speaker, sir, available measures indicate that Singapore's long-term inflation expectations remain well anchored. The 5-year ahead inflation forecasts of economists and professional forecasters have been broadly unchanged over the past 2 years. While households' longer-term inflation expectations picked up in late 2021 to early 2022 alongside the rise in global and domestic inflation, the latest survey from December showed that expectations have fallen close to the historical levels. The stabilization of households' longer-term inflation expectations occurred alongside a similar outturn in actual inflation in late 2022. Year-on-year, MES core inflation remained unchanged at 5.1% in Q4 2022 compared to Q3 after rising continuously since Q1 2021. Now, on a month-on-month basis, the pace of increase in core prices has trended down over the second half of 2022. MAS, like other central banks, will continue to focus on stabilizing near-term inflation and price expectations, as these weigh heavily in the formation of longer-term inflation expectations. As the member observed, multiple factors will influence the path of global, regional, and domestic inflation over the longer term. Now, these include, for instance, demographics, technological advances that impact productivity, future trends in globalization, and central banks' commitment to ensure low and stable inflation in their economies. Now, these factors can potentially boost or dampen inflation. There is therefore uncertainty and a significant diversity of views among central bankers, academics, and analysts on the likely inflation trends in the long term. But I would like to reassure members that MAS is closely monitoring and assessing these developments and is unwavering in its objective of securing price stability for sustainable growth.
Mr. Supaat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank MAS for his answer to my questions. First, I have two SQs. My first SQ is in regards to the assessment of the long-term inflation by MAS and the government. How often would the MAS or the government actually assess the long-term inflation estimates, taking into consideration the changes in dynamics in commodity prices and global shifts and inflation dynamics? Second question is related to what has happened overnight and probably things that have happened in the financial sector globally. How does financial stability play a part on our exchange rate policy considerations and also long-term inflation? And if MOS can also briefly share about the latest developments on financial stability given overnight happenings, what impact does it have on inflation and Singapore's financial sector as well? Thank you.
So I thank the member for his SQ. The longer-term inflation expectations are proxied by 5-year ahead forecast for inflation, and there's both looking at professional forecasters as well as household expectations. The household expectations survey, DBS SKBI Syndex survey, as I mentioned, has shown that 5-year ahead inflation forecast has stabilized over the June and September surveys and fell in the latest survey in December. So it's a mixture of both professional forecasters as well as household expectations. With regards to the member's second SQ, maybe I will frame it, the context in terms of how that would have been impacted by or affecting longer-term inflation. As a member knows, and members of this House knows, MAS's monetary policy is medium-term focused to achieve low and stable inflation as the basis for Singapore's economic growth. Now, MAS has tightened monetary policy since October 2021 and will continue to closely monitor global and domestic economic developments in the run-up to the scheduled policy review in April 2023, where it will take into account the implications for inflation as well as growth. By themselves, near-term shocks, such as the recent developments in the international banking industry, would not have direct implications for the long-term path of inflation and the Singapore dollar nominal effective exchange rate, or SNER. As I mentioned in my earlier response, these depend on longer long-term structural factors such as demographics, tech advances that impact productivity, as well as future trends in globalization. But as the member also observed that there had been developments overnight and earlier this morning, and I would like to point members to the statement that MAS had issued this morning and other statements related to developments in the international banking sector in March 16, 2023, and as well as March 13, 2023. Allow me to make a few quick points. First, Credit Suisse Group AG will continue operating in Singapore with no interruptions or restrictions following the announced takeover by UBS Group AG, or UBS. Customers of Credit Suisse will continue to have full access to their accounts, and Credit Suisse's contracts with counterparties remain in force. The takeover is not expected to have an impact on the stability of Singapore's banking system. Second, Singapore's banking system remains sound and resilient. The Singapore dollar money market and foreign exchange market continue to function well. The Singapore banking system has insignificant exposures to the failed banks in the US, and Singapore banks have confirmed that their exposure to Credit Suisse is insignificant. Now, banks in Singapore are well capitalized and conduct regular stress tests against credit and other risks. Their liquidity positions are healthy, underpinned by a stable and diversified funding base. MAS will continue to closely monitor the domestic financial system and international developments and stands ready to provide liquidity through its suite of facilities to ensure that Singapore's financial system remains stable and financial markets continue to function in an orderly manner.
Associate Professor James Lim.
Just a quick follow-up on the question about inflation expectations. I wonder if the MOS can elaborate on whether MAS has observed any evidence of inflation pressures actually passing through to wages in particular, and if so, what kind of mitigation mechanisms MAS has in terms of dealing with the possibility that this could become more entrenched.
Thank the member for his SQ. As MAS has also communicated, MAS core inflation is expected to ease more discernibly over the second half of 2023, and this reflects a combination of base effects and also moderating external and domestic labor cost pressures. What does this entail? It actually suggests that longer-term inflation expectations are unlikely to persistently increase. Of course, we are looking at this and monitoring this very closely. But more broadly, wages in Singapore are not tightly indexed to inflation. Over the years, our tripartite wage-setting institutions have ensured that wage outcomes remain in line with productivity growth. For these reasons, we assess that the risk of a wage price spiral remains contained at this point, but we will closely monitor developments as they go. Thank you.